Chapter 1. Under the Rain of Shadows. The rain fell heavily that night, transforming the city into a sea of shadows and distorted reflections. In the narrow streets, only a few passers-by ventured out, each with their own secret stories and intertwined destinies. Amidst this somber scene, one figure stood out: Ricardo Alves, a renowned private detective, whose name was whispered with reverence and fear in the corridors of law and justice. Ricardo Alves was no ordinary man. With his sharp eyes and impenetrable demeanor, he was known for his ability to solve cases that left the police baffled. Before becoming a private detective, Alves served as a military police officer. It was there, on the hard streets and treacherous alleys, that he honed his skills of observation and analysis, and almost surgical precision in every move and decision. His professional journey was marked by notable successes, each solved case a testament to his relentless pursuit of the truth. That night, Alves found himself in his office, a small, stuffy room on the top floor of an old building. The dim light from the desk lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls as he reviewed the dossier of his new case once again. He was a meticulous man, intuitive, driven by a strong sense of justice. For him, every detail mattered. Every nuance could be the key to unraveling the mystery. The sound of the rain against the windows and the distant murmur of the city provided the perfect soundtrack for his thoughts. He knew that out there, the world continued to spin, indifferent to the tragedies and secrets that permeated his existence. But for Alves, each case was a personal mission, a battle against the darkness that threatened to engulf everything around him. As he leafed through the files, memories of his time in the military police flooded his mind. Moments of tension, violent confrontations, and above all, the sense of accomplishment when putting criminals behind bars. That life shaped the man he had become: relentless, perceptive, and above all, committed to the truth. Ricardo Alves knew his journey would not be easy. Each case brought its own complications, its own traps, but he was prepared. With one last look at the dossier on his desk, he turned off the light, stood up, and went out to face another night of mysteries in the city that never sleeps. Chapter 2. The Enigma of the Locked Room. The city was still shrouded in a damp fog when Ricardo Alves received the call that would change the course of his night. On the other end of the line was a tense and urgent voice. It was Chief Mendez. "Alves, we have a complicated case. A businessman was found dead in his home, in a room locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. We need you here now." Upon arriving at the luxurious residence of Jorge Ribeiro, Alves was met with a scene straight out of a mystery novel. The imposing iron gate, now open, led to a meticulously cared for yet lifeless garden, reflecting the coldness of the situation unfolding there. Inside the house, the police and forensic team worked in silence, each aware of the gravity of the case. Ricardo Alves approached the locked room where the body was found. The door was still intact, with no sign of forced entry. He carefully examined the lock, noting that it was locked from the inside. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air, leaving behind an almost impossible mystery. Inside the room, Jorge Ribeiro's body lay on the floor, a look of shock frozen on his face. The room, impeccably arranged, seemed like a carefully orchestrated scene. A faint smell of bitter almonds hung in the air, a subtle clue that did not escape Alves's keen senses. He scrutinized every detail of the room. A small silver clock on the bedside table displayed the exact time of death. A half-full crystal glass of amber liquid sat on the table, with no visible fingerprints. Alves noticed a rug slightly out of place and a small, nearly imperceptible stain on the floor. With almost surgical precision, Alves began piecing together the puzzle. Every detail, no matter how small, could be the key to unraveling the mystery. He examined the curtains, the arrangement of the furniture, even the pattern of marks on the walls. Nothing was there by accident, and he knew the killer had a meticulous plan. Ricardo Alves approached Chief Mendez, who was speaking with the forensic team. "We need to investigate each of the suspects, verify their alibis, and understand their motivations. This is no ordinary crime. It's a chess game, and every move counts." Chief Mendez nodded. "We have 3 main suspects: Mariana Santos, Jorge's ex-wife; Carlos Ferreira, his business partner; and Luis Costa, a former employee. They all have motives, but we need concrete evidence." Alves knew this would be one of the most challenging cases of his career. The absence of obvious clues made the investigation even more complex, but he was determined. Every mystery had its solution, and he was ready to uncover it, no matter how tortuous the journey might be. Chapter 3: Echoes of a Crime. The wind howled outside as Ricardo Alves made his way to the crime scene. Jorge Ribeiro's house, now shrouded in a sinister aura, seemed more like a fortress of secrets than a home. As he crossed the police tape, he felt the weight of the mystery awaiting him. The rain had ceased, but the air was still heavy with humidity and the promise of more dark revelations. Inside the house, Alves was met with a heavy atmosphere. The silence was broken only by the whispers of police officers and the distant sound of cameras capturing every detail of the scene. At the center of it all was the locked room where Jorge Ribeiro's body had been found. Alves took a deep breath before entering. The room was meticulously arranged, but there was a clinical coldness that contrasted with the luxury of the furnishings. The detective began his analysis with a keen eye for the smallest details. The position of the body, the direction of the furniture, everything told a story. Jorge Ribeiro's body lay on its back, lifeless eyes fixed on the ceiling. Alves noted the expression of shock and fear frozen on the businessman's face. It was clear he had not anticipated his final fate. Beside the body was a crystal glass containing a partially consumed amber liquid. Alves carefully picked up the glass, observing the absence of fingerprints. He walked slowly around the room, his eyes scanning every inch. He noticed a slight misalignment in the luxurious carpet, a nearly imperceptible mark suggesting something heavy had been moved recently. Next to the bed, a small object caught his attention. A silver clock showing an exact time, possibly the time of death. Alves crouched down, examining a small stain on the floor. The color and smell reminded him of bitter almonds, a classic clue of cyanide. He mentally recorded every detail, knowing nothing could be overlooked. As he stood up, his mind began to connect the dots. He knew the scene had been carefully orchestrated. The killer wanted the crime to appear perfect, but there was no perfect crime that could escape Ricardo Alves's scrutiny. He exited the room, finding Chief Mendez outside. "We have a complicated case, but nothing we can't solve," Alves said with a slight smile of determination. Mendez nodded, visibly relieved to have Alves on the investigation. Ricardo knew the next step would be to interrogate the suspects. Each had motives and stories to tell, but he needed concrete evidence. His mind buzzed with possibilities, theories, and the certainty that the truth was there, hidden in the details. As he left the house, the rain began again, fine and insistent. Alves looked up at the cloudy sky, feeling that the storm was just beginning. But he was ready. Darkness could not hide the truth forever, and he was determined to bring light to this mystery. Chapter 4: Web of Secrets. The next morning, the sun struggled to break through the thick clouds, casting a diffuse light over the city. Ricardo Alves, after a night of reflection and meticulous notes, was ready to face the next phase of the investigation. He had 3 main suspects, each with a strong motive and a troubled history with Jorge Ribeiro. Mariana Santos, Jorge's ex-wife, was the first to be interrogated. She sat in the interview room, an elegant woman with eyes that revealed the depth of her anger and frustration. "I hated him," Mariana admitted bluntly. "He destroyed my life, took my children, and left me with nothing. But that doesn't mean I killed him." Alves observed every movement, every nuance of her expression. Mariana had a solid alibi. She was at a charity gala on the night of the murder, surrounded by witnesses. However, the hatred in her eyes was undeniable, a hatred that could very well be a cover for something deeper. Carlos Ferreira, Jorge's business partner, was next to enter the room. He was an impeccably dressed businessman, but there was a palpable nervousness in his posture. "We had financial disagreements," Carlos confessed. "Jorge was about to ruin me. I would have lost everything if it weren't for a last-minute deal." Alves took quick notes, recording every word and hesitation. Carlos had clear financial motives for wanting Jorge out of the picture, but he also had an alibi. He was in a meeting with investors at the time of the crime, and security cameras confirmed his presence. Lastly, Luis Costa, a former employee of Jorge's, sat down, a man with tired eyes and a bitter expression. "I gave him years of my life," Luis said, "and he tossed me aside like I was nothing. I was at home alone on the night of his death. No one can confirm it, but I'm not a killer." The anger and betrayal were evident in Luis's voice, but without a solid alibi, he was the weakest suspect, and at the same time, the hardest to prove guilty or innocent. Each interrogation revealed layers of secrets and lies. Alves felt the growing pressure to piece together a complex puzzle. Each suspect had clear motives, but the definitive proof placing them at the crime scene was still missing. As Alves pondered the collected information, he knew the truth was hidden in the shadows of these individuals' complicated lives. He was determined to unearth every secret, every betrayal, until the killer was revealed. The afternoon was fading as Alves left the interrogation room. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the thrill of the challenge. The city, now bathed in a golden, melancholic light, awaited the justice he was determined to deliver. Chapter 5: Silent Revenge. Ricardo Alves walked through the city streets, his thoughts immersed in the dark stories he had heard. Each suspect carried a burden of hurt and resentment that could easily turn into vengeance. He knew that to solve this case, he needed to delve deeper into the secrets of Jorge Ribeiro and everyone who orbited his life. Returning to his office, Alves sat in his worn leather chair and began reviewing the information. The motives of each suspect were strong, but something was missing to connect everything. He needed to better understand who Jorge Ribeiro was and what he had done to generate so much animosity. Mariana Santos, the ex-wife, was a woman shattered by legal battles and the loss of her children. Her life was devastated by Jorge's influence and power. She had the anger necessary to commit the crime, but her alibi seemed solid. Carlos Ferreira, the business partner, was nearly bankrupted by financial disagreements with Jorge. The tense meetings and verbal confrontations between the two painted a picture of a relationship that had deteriorated beyond repair. Money was a powerful motive, but he also had a robust alibi. Luis Costa, the loyal employee betrayed, was dismissed without consideration after years of dedication. The betrayal Luis felt was deep, turning his loyalty into bitter resentment. His lack of an alibi put him in a delicate position, but the lack of concrete evidence left the case inconclusive. Alves decided to visit Jorge's house again, this time with a more critical eye for the details of his life. Entering the luxurious residence, he began to explore the darker corners of the house. In Jorge's study, among financial documents and contracts, Alves found a diary. The pages were a silent confession of Jorge's unethical methods to achieve success, revealing a man who manipulated and destroyed anyone who crossed his path. One specific entry caught Alves's attention. Jorge mentioned a secret meeting with an unidentified ally, planning a strategy to financially destroy Carlos Ferreira. The detective knew this information could be the key to unraveling the complex web of revenge. In the basement of the house, Alves found a safe. After a few minutes of trying, he managed to open it. Inside was a collection of incriminating documents, evidence of Jorge's dishonest methods. Among the papers was an unsent letter from Mariana, full of bitter accusations and veiled threats. Another piece of the puzzle fit, but it still didn't complete the picture. Alves's investigation revealed more than just the suspect's motives. It showed how Jorge Ribeiro had created a network of enemies in his relentless pursuit of power. Each piece of information painted a portrait of a man who, in his climb to the top, sowed the seeds of his own destruction. As the day came to an end, Alves knew he was closer to the truth. The killer was among the suspects, and the silent revenge that motivated the crime was a direct reflection of Jorge's actions. The detective was determined to expose the truth, no matter how many layers of deceit he had to peel away. Chapter 6: Web of Deceit. The phone rang in the middle of the night, pulling Ricardo Alves from a light and restless sleep. It was Ana Paula, his assistant specializing in data analysis. "Alves, I found something. I need you to come to the office now," she said, her voice grave and urgent. Alves didn't hesitate. He dressed quickly and headed to his office, where Ana Paula was already waiting. On her monitor, a complex graph of emails and financial transactions glowed on the screen. "I managed to access a secret email account of Jorge's. He used it to communicate anonymously with one of the suspects," she explained. Alves stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Who was the contact?" Ana Paula clicked on one of the emails. "Carlos Ferreira." "But there's more." The messages indicate that Jorge and Carlos were planning something big, a scheme that would involve the financial ruin of third parties. Alves frowned. "This changes everything. Carlos was more involved than we thought, but why would he kill Jorge if they were working together?" Ana Paula opened another email, dated a few days before the murder. It looks like Jorge was about to betray Carlos, handing all the information about the scheme to the authorities in exchange for immunity. This revelation made Alves's blood run faster. It was a double cross, a dangerous game of power and revenge. He knew he needed to act quickly before Carlos realized they were onto him. The next morning, Alves summoned Carlos for a meeting. He wanted to confront him with the evidence without raising suspicion. Carlos arrived at the office, appearing calm, but there was a latent nervousness in his eyes. "We've discovered something interesting in our investigation," Alves began, watching Carlos's every reaction. "It seems you and Jorge were involved in something deeper than just business." Carlos tried to maintain his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, Alves. I was just trying to save my company. Nothing more." Alves baited the hook. "So you don't mind if I show these emails to the authorities? They reveal a serious conspiracy, Carlos. Jorge was about to turn you in." Carlos's expression changed. His mask of calm began to crumble. "He forced me. I had no choice. But I didn't kill him. I was in a meeting, you know that." Alves leaned forward, his eyes penetrating. "Your alibi may be solid, but the motives are stacking up. We need more answers, Carlos. And I'll get them one way or another." After Carlos left, Alves reflected on the next steps. The investigation was becoming increasingly complicated. Each clue, each revelation, seemed to lead to more questions than answers. The pressure from the media and the police was mounting, and he felt the weight of expectation on his shoulders. He decided to visit Mariana and Luis again, seeking new approaches in their interrogations. Perhaps, with the new information, he could break their defenses and find contradictions in their stories. He knew the truth was close, but still hidden in the shadows of lies and manipulations. At Mariana's house, he confronted her with the new data. "Mariana, we've discovered that Jorge was involved in a financial conspiracy. Does this mean anything to you?" Mariana looked at him, surprised. "I didn't know that. I only knew he was always manipulating, always controlling everything and everyone." During the visit to Luis, the approach was more direct. "Luis, I found evidence that Jorge was betraying his business partners. Does this give you more motive to have killed him?" Luis shook his head, frustrated. "He destroyed my life, Alves, but I'm not a killer. I wanted him to pay for what he did, but not like this." As night fell, Alves felt closer to the truth, yet the resolution still seemed distant. He knew the key was in the details, in the small inconsistencies that would only reveal themselves with patience and keen insight. Chapter 7: Revelation Under the Moonlight. The full moon cast a pale glow over the city, creating long and unsettling shadows. Ricardo Alves, after a day of interrogations and revelations, felt that the truth was nearing. He knew there were still missing pieces in the puzzle, but one detail, one crucial clue, could change everything. Back at his office, Alves reviewed the notes and the discovered emails. One message, in particular, caught his attention. An exchange between Jorge and an unknown contact, mentioning a combination of numbers and letters. Alves decided it was time to involve Ana Paula again. "I need you to decipher this," he said, showing the message to Ana Paula. She smiled, accepting the challenge. "Give me a few hours," she replied, already heading to the computer. While Ana Paula worked, Alves returned to the crime scene once more, this time with a fresh perspective. Jorge Ribeiro's house, silent and cold, seemed to harbor more secrets than he initially thought. He went back to the locked room, observing the small details. Something wasn't right. The key to solving the case was there, he could feel it. Suddenly, something caught his attention, a small groove in the wall near the headboard. Alves approached, carefully analyzing it. The mark seemed recent, as if something had been forced there. He pulled a small knife from his pocket and, with precision, managed to open a concealed panel. Inside was a small, discreet safe. Using his experience with locks, Alves managed to unlock the safe. Inside, he found a series of incriminating documents and a USB device. He took everything, knowing this could be the definitive proof he was looking for. Back at the office, Ana Paula had finished her analysis. "I deciphered the combination. It's a password for an electronic safe Jorge used to store confidential information." Alves showed the USB he had found. "I think we have the other piece of the puzzle." Connecting the USB, they discovered a series of audio files. Alves played the first one, and Jorge Ribeiro's voice echoed through the room, discussing his plans of betrayal with Carlos Ferreira and mentioning a substantial payment to Luis Costa, a bribe to keep him silent about the illegal operations. "This changes everything," said Alves. Carlos was being manipulated, and Luis knew more than he admitted. "We need to act quickly." With this new evidence, Alves and Ana Paula organized an operation to confront Luis. They knew he was the most vulnerable piece of the puzzle. The next night, with the moon still high, Alves and his team went to Luis's house. They knocked on the door, and a tense Luis opened it, surprised to see the detective. "We have new evidence, Luis. It's better if you cooperate," said Alves, showing the recording. Luis grumbled. "Jorge made me do terrible things. He paid me to keep everything secret. When I found out he was going to discard me, You killed him," Alves completed, his voice firm but compassionate. Luis fell to his knees, confessing the crime and explaining the details of the fateful night. Luis's confession closed the case. Carlos was brought in for further questioning, and Mariana finally found some peace knowing the truth had come to light. As the night wore on, Alves looked at the full moon, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. Another mystery solved, another truth unearthed under the moonlight. Chapter 8. Final Confrontation. The rain fell torrentially as Ricardo Alves and his team headed to the location where all the suspects had been gathered. An old mansion, far from the city center, served as the stage for the conclusion of one of the most complex cases Alves had ever faced. Dark clouds and distant thunder added a dramatic touch to the already tense atmosphere. Inside the mansion, Mariana, Carlos, and Luis sat in a spacious room, each grappling with their own internal demons. The anxiety was palpable, the sound of rain against the windows only intensifying the suspense. Alves entered the room, his presence immediately imposing silence. "Thank you for coming," Alves began, his voice firm. "Today, we are going to solve this mystery once and for all." He walked to the center of the room, where a table was laid out with all the evidence collected during the investigation. "Each of you had reasons to want Jorge Ribeiro dead. Mariana, you were destroyed by him. Carlos, your career nearly ruined. Luis, betrayed and used as a disposable piece." The three suspects exchanged glances, the tension mounting. "But we have new evidence," Alves continued, connecting the USB device to a laptop and projecting the audio files onto the screen. "This recording shows that Jorge was manipulating all of you. He planned to betray Carlos and bribe Luis." Carlos paled as he heard his voice in the audio, discussing plans with Jorge. "He was blackmailing me," he said, his voice trembling. "And Luis," Alves continued, "you took Jorge's money to keep everything secret. When you found out he planned to discard you, you decided you couldn't let him live." Luis lowered his head, tears mixing with the rain streaming down his face. "I didn't want to do it, but he left me no choice." Alves looked at Mariana. "And you, Mariana, despite all the hatred, had no direct involvement in the crime. Your anger was justified, but you didn't kill him." Mariana sighed, relieved and at the same time devastated by the revelations. "I just wanted justice," she murmured. The detective then turned to Carlos. "You may have been manipulated, but you were still involved in illegal schemes. The authorities will have to deal with that." With all the suspects revealed and the killer confessed, Alves felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. He had solved the case, but the lives destroyed along the way were a somber reminder of the price of truth. "That's it," Alves said, packing away the USB and concluding the meeting. "Justice will now take its course." As Alves's team escorted Luis into custody and began processing the evidence against Carlos, Alves and Mariana stayed behind, watching the rain through the mansion's window. "Thank you, Alves," said Mariana, her voice soft but firm, "for bringing the truth to light." Alves nodded, his gaze lost in the storm outside. "The truth always comes to light, Mariana, even if it brings with it pain and regret." And so, under the incessant rain, another chapter in Ricardo Alves's career came to an end, with the certainty that justice, although delayed, had finally prevailed. Chapter 9. Echoes of Justice. The dawn brought new light to the city, dispelling the shadows of the previous night. For Ricardo Alves, it was a new day, but the consequences of the case still reverberated. Luis Costa's confession and the implications of Carlos Ferreira's actions had unearthed a web of corruption and betrayal that would not easily fade. Alves spent the morning at the police department, organizing documents and evidence for the final report. Chief Mendez, who had followed the case's progression, entered the room with a serious expression. "Good work, Alves. But we know this case is just the tip of the iceberg." Alves nodded, aware of the far-reaching repercussions. "We need to ensure that everyone involved pays for what they've done, Mendez. Jorge Ribeiro built an empire on lies and manipulation. Now, it's our responsibility to clean up this mess." While Mendez handled the legal procedures, Alves decided to visit Mariana. He felt there was something more to be said, a closure she needed. When he arrived at her house, he was greeted with a look of mixed gratitude and pain. "Alves," said Mariana, inviting him in, "I still can't believe everything that happened. It feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from." Alves sat on the sofa, observing the family photos on the walls. "Mariana, the truth is a heavy burden, but it also sets you free. Jorge was a complicated man, and his actions caused a lot of pain. But now you have a chance to start over." She sighed, tears threatening to fall. "Thank you for bringing the truth to light. I just hope my children understand and can forgive what happened." As he said goodbye to Mariana, Alves felt the weight of the responsibility he bore. Each resolved case was a life impacted, a story he helped rewrite. Later, he met Ana Paula at their usual cafe. She was excited, still energized by the crucial role she played in solving the case. "Alves, you did an amazing job. So what's next?" Alves smiled, a smile that didn't fully reach his eyes. "There are always more mysteries to solve, Ana. But today, I just want a coffee and a bit of peace." Ana Paula laughed, raising her cup. "To the truth, then. May it always prevail." As the day progressed, Alves returned to his office. He sat at his desk, looking at the files of past cases. Each one represented a battle, a fight for justice in a world filled with darkness. He knew his journey was far from over, but at that moment, he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Alves, we have a new case. It seems someone needs your talents once again." He stood up, grabbing his coat. "I'm on my way," he replied with renewed determination. The city never slept, and neither could he. The pursuit of truth was relentless, and he was ready to face the next challenge. Chapter 10. Under the Shadow of Truth. Dusk enveloped the city as Ricardo Alves sat in his office, a cup of coffee cooling beside his documents. The Jorge Ribeiro case was closed, but the scars left by this investigation still pulsed in the detective's mind. The room's silence, interrupted only by the ticking of an old clock, offered a moment of introspection. Alves picked up a framed photo on his desk, an old image from his time in the military police. He remembered those days as a time of lost innocence and challenged principles. It was there that he learned the line between justice and revenge was often thin and nebulous. The Jorge Ribeiro case had rekindled these memories, bringing up moral dilemmas he thought he had resolved. As he gazed at the photo, the door slowly opened. Ana Paula entered, carrying a bulky folder. "Alves, I brought the final reports. I thought you'd want to review them before we submit them to the chief." He nodded, acknowledging her with a gesture. "Sure, Ana. Leave them here." She sensed the seriousness in his tone and sat beside him. "It was a tough case, wasn't it? We all were affected in some way." "Yes," Alves said with a heavy sigh. "Every case leaves its mark. And this one, in particular, made me question a lot of things. About how far we should go in pursuit of the truth, and the price we're willing to pay for justice." Ana Paula looked at him with understanding. "You always knew this job wouldn't be easy, Ricardo. But that's exactly why you're so good at it. You genuinely care. That makes all the difference." Alves smiled, a light and sincere smile. "Thank you, Ana. I needed to hear that." He picked up the folder and began to leaf through the reports, while Ana Paula stood to leave. We'll face the next challenge together, as always. After reviewing the documents, Alves closed the folder with a sigh of relief. He felt at peace having closed the case, but knew the repercussions would linger. Luis Costa would be tried, and the revelations about Carlos Ferreira would bring profound changes to the city's business landscape. Mariana, in turn, would have to rebuild her life from the wreckage left by her ex-husband. Leaving his office, Alves decided to walk through the city streets. The night was cool, with a gentle breeze that carried away the tension of the past days. He observed the city lights, each one representing a life, a story. He felt reconnected with the essence of his work, bringing justice and clarity in a world often shrouded in shadows. At a nearby park, he found an old newsstand still open. He bought a newspaper and sat on a bench to read the headlines. As expected, the Jorge Ribeiro case dominated the front page. "Businessman dead, network of corruption and revenge exposed," read the headline. Alves read the article carefully, noting the details he had helped uncover. He closed the newspaper and took a deep breath, feeling a mix of satisfaction and melancholy. The truth had been revealed, and the city now knew who Jorge Ribeiro truly was. As the night wore on, Alves returned to his apartment. He sat in his favorite chair, gazing at the stars through the window. He knew new cases would come, each with its own mysteries and challenges. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of tranquility, reflecting on the impact of his work. The phone rang again, breaking the silence. He answered, already anticipating the next challenge. "Alves here," he said, prepared to face whatever came. The quest for truth was endless, but he was ready, as always.